There was a time when drinking a cup of coffee could get you arrested, fined, or worse. Not because coffee was dangerous in any chemical sense, because of what it did to people once they drank it together. Long before coffee sat on every desk, fueled every office, and became the most consumed beverage on the planet, it was treated like a threat to public order. Governments banned it, religious leaders condemned it, rulers shut down the places where people drank it. And for a strange stretch of history, the world's most ordinary drink was considered dangerous enough to outlaw. Coffee's story begins in the highlands of Ethiopia, where wild coffee plants grew for centuries before anyone thought to brew them into a drink. Legend says a goat herder named Kaldi noticed his goats acting unusually energetic after eating red berries from a certain bush. Curious, he tried them himself. Whether or not that story is true, something in the Ethiopian highlands eventually crossed into Yemen, where people began roasting and brewing the beans into the drink we'd recognize today. And from there, coffee did something almost no plant in history had done before. It started reshaping how humans socialized. By the 1400s and 1500s, coffee had spread through the Arabian Peninsula, and coffee houses began appearing across cities like Mecca and Cairo. These weren't just places to drink something warm. They were places where people gathered, talked, debated, and exchanged ideas, often late into the night, often across social lines that rarely mixed elsewhere. Strangers sat together. Conversations wandered into religion, politics, and gossip. And that combination, caffeine plus crowds plus conversation, made certain rulers extremely nervous. In 1511, the governor of Mecca, a man named Khair Beg, ordered coffee banned entirely. His reasoning wasn't about health. He worried that coffee houses were becoming breeding grounds for opposition, places where people might plot against him under the cover of casual conversation. Coffee was treated less like a beverage and more like a security risk. The ban didn't last. Higher religious authorities eventually overturned it, and coffee kept spreading. But it was an early sign of something that would repeat again and again across centuries. Coffee wasn't being banned because of what it was being banned because of what people did once they had it in their hands. The pattern continued as coffee moved into the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Murad IV, ruling in the 1600s, became convinced that coffee houses were spreading dissent and undermining his authority. So he didn't just ban coffee. According to some historical accounts, he personally walked the streets of Istanbul in disguise, and anyone caught drinking it could face brutal punishment. Coffee houses were shut down. People still kept drinking coffee anyway, just more quietly, behind closed doors, the same way people quietly keep doing almost anything that gets banned. Meanwhile, coffee was making its way into Europe, and Europe had its own reasons to panic. When coffee first reached Italy in the late 1500s, some Catholic clergy viewed it with suspicion, partly because it came from the Muslim world, and partly because anything new and foreign tends to trigger fear. Some religious figures reportedly urged Pope Clement VIII to ban it as a drink of infidels. According to popular legend, the Pope decided to try it himself before making a ruling, and supposedly enjoyed it so much that he blessed it instead of banning it. True or exaggerated, the story captures something real. Coffee kept showing up at the edge of religious and political anxiety, again and again, in country after country. England had its own coffee panic, but for a slightly different reason. By the 1600s, coffee houses had exploded across London. They became known as penny universities because for the price of a cup of coffee, anyone could sit, listen, and join conversations about politics, science, business, and philosophy. Merchants, scholars, and ordinary citizens debated side by side. Lloyd's of London, one of the most famous insurance markets in history, actually started inside a coffee house. To the people running England, this was alarming. In 1675, King Charles II issued a proclamation attempting to shut coffee houses down entirely, worried that they had become centers of political gossip and rebellion against the crown. The backlash was immediate. People were furious. The order was reversed within days. Coffee houses had already become too important to England's social and intellectual life to disappear that easily. Sweden took things even further. In the 1700s, Swedish authorities grew so suspicious of coffee that King Gustav III allegedly ordered a bizarre experiment. Two convicted criminals were sentenced to drink coffee and tea, respectively, every single day for the rest of their lives, while doctors monitored which drink would kill them first. The supposed goal was to prove coffee was deadly. Both prisoners ended up far outliving the doctors assigned to watch them, and the tea drinker reportedly outlived the coffee drinker as well, though by then everyone involved in the experiment, including the king himself, had already died. Sweden banned coffee multiple times over the following decades anyway, taxing it heavily and even confiscating coffee cups and saucers during one especially aggressive crackdown in the 1750s. People kept drinking it in secret regardless. What's strange, looking back, is that almost none of these bans were really about the drink itself. Nobody seriously believed coffee was poisoning entire populations. The real fear, again and again, across empires, kingdoms, and religious authorities, was what coffee enabled. Alert minds, late-night conversations, strangers mixing freely, ideas spreading faster than rulers could control them. A pot of coffee turned out to be one of the most quietly destabilizing inventions in human history, not because of caffeine, but because of community. And that's really the through line across every single coffee ban in history. Authorities weren't afraid of a bean. They were afraid of what happens when ordinary people gather somewhere, stay awake longer, and start talking to each other without permission. Coffee houses became some of the earliest informal public forums in human history, places where social status mattered less than usual and conversation mattered more. That alone was enough to make plenty of powerful people deeply uncomfortable. Eventually, of course, every single ban failed. Coffee didn't disappear. It multiplied. It crossed oceans, planted itself across colonies in the Americas, fueled the rise of cafes across Europe, and eventually became so deeply embedded in daily life that the idea of banning it today sounds almost absurd. Try to imagine modern society functioning without coffee shops on every corner, without the morning ritual, without the meetings that quietly run on caffeine. It's hard to picture, because coffee didn't just survive its centuries of bans, it became unavoidable. And maybe that's the strangest part of coffee's history. It was never really the drink that frightened rulers and religious leaders. It was the rooms it created. Small wooden tables where strangers debated ideas. Quiet corners where revolutions were occasionally whispered into existence. A simple act, sitting down with a warm drink and talking, somehow became one of the most consistently feared social behaviors in recorded history. So the next time you're standing in line, ordering a coffee, half awake, scrolling your phone, waiting for your name to be called, it's worth remembering that the drink in your hand was once considered dangerous enough to outlaw across entire empires, not because of the caffeine, because of the conversations it made possible. And somehow, after centuries of bans, confiscations, and royal experiments, that tiny cup of coffee won anyway.